Jesus had already praised the faith of a Roman officer, but when this foreign mother begged him to save her daughter, he appeared to reject her 3 times. First, silence. Nothing. Then came the boundary. Israel first. Finally, a sentence about children, bread, and dogs. Yet moments later, Jesus called her faith great and healed her daughter from a distance. So what happened between the silence and the miracle, and what did she see beneath that table? Mark preserves one word, Matthew leaves out first. And that single word is one of the keys to the entire encounter. Because Jesus did not literally say no 3 times, Matthew presents 3 different barriers. The first is his failure to answer. The second is his statement that he was sent to the lost sheep of Israel. The third is an image in which children receive bread while dogs wait below the table. These are not 3 identical refusals. Each one takes the central question deeper. Does Jesus hear her? Can his mission include someone like her? And if Israel receives the bread first, does that mean there can be nothing at all for anyone outside Israel? The encounter appears in Matthew chapter 15 and Mark chapter 7. Both Gospels agree on the central event, but they shape it differently. Mark emphasizes the order of the meal. Matthew emphasizes the height of the barrier. And before either Gospel introduces the woman, both place Jesus in a setting that makes the encounter even more significant. He has just been involved in a dispute about purity. The Pharisees criticize his disciples for eating without following the traditional ritual of washing their hands. Jesus responds by moving the argument away from external contamination and toward the human heart. What enters the mouth, he explains, is not the deepest source of human defilement. The darker problem comes from within. Then the story takes him toward the region of Tyre. That movement can look like a simple travel note. It is not. Jesus has just challenged assumptions about clean and unclean in his teaching. Now the narrative carries him across a geographical boundary into predominantly Gentile territory. The text never says he traveled there solely to meet this particular woman. It does not reveal his private reason for making the journey. What it does give us is a striking sequence. A boundary is challenged in words. Then Jesus crosses one with his feet. Mark says he entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there, but he could not remain hidden. His reputation had arrived before him. Stories about healing, deliverance, and extraordinary authority had already crossed the border. Somewhere in that foreign region, a mother heard that the Jewish teacher from Galilee was nearby, and she went looking for him. Mark describes her as Greek, Syrophoenician by birth. Matthew chooses a much older name. He calls her a Canaanite woman. That word is not casual. By the 1st century, Canaanite was not the ordinary label someone would expect for a woman from that coastal region. It was a name loaded with biblical memory. For a Jewish audience, it reached back into the ancient history of Israel, to peoples remembered as standing outside the covenant and at times in direct conflict with Israel. Matthew is not merely telling us where she lived. He is placing her as far outside as his biblical vocabulary allows, which makes the first words from her mouth even more surprising. She cries out to Jesus as Lord and Son of David. Son of David is not a pagan title. It belongs to Israel's messianic hope, the expectation that a king from David's line would come to restore and rule God's people. This woman has the wrong ancestry according to the social boundaries surrounding the scene, but she uses the right title. She recognizes something about Jesus that many people inside Israel are still struggling to understand. And she comes with one urgent request. Her daughter is suffering terribly under the power of an unclean spirit. Matthew does not give us a list of symptoms. He does not describe the child's behavior or tell us what the mother had already tried. We should not fill those gaps with invented scenes. The text gives us what matters. A daughter is in severe distress. Her mother believes Jesus can help. She calls out to him, and he does not answer her a word. No explanation, no reassurance, not even a spoken refusal. Silence. A direct no can be painful, but at least it gives the person asking something definite. Silence is different. Silence leaves an empty space, and the human mind rarely leaves that space empty for long. Perhaps he did not hear me. Perhaps he heard and did not care. Perhaps I am asking incorrectly. Perhaps mercy exists, but not for someone like me. The gospel does not tell us what passed through the woman's mind. It shows us what she did next. She continued crying out. She did not decide that silence was the final verdict, and eventually it is not Jesus who first reacts. It is the disciples. They approach him and ask him to send her away because she keeps crying out behind them. Their precise intention is debated. They may want Jesus to dismiss her without helping. They may want him to grant the request, so she will finally leave. Either way, The interruption has become the problem they want solved. Her suffering has become noise, and that reaction quietly exposes one of the tensions running through the scene. The people closest to Jesus are ready to manage the outsider before they have understood what her presence might reveal. Then Jesus speaks. He says he was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The silence has become a boundary. His mission, as described here, has a historical focus. Earlier in Matthew, when Jesus sent the 12 disciples out, he directed them toward the lost sheep of Israel. His earthly ministry did not begin as an undifferentiated mission to every population in the Roman world. It began inside Israel's story. The promises had been made there. The Messiah came through that history. The mission moved through Israel before it would move outward to the nations. And this woman is not part of Israel. Matthew allows that barrier to stand in full view. Mark, however, preserves one additional word when he tells the next part of the encounter. Jesus says the children should be fed first. The children still receive priority. The bread still belongs to them before it goes anywhere else. But first is a word about sequence. It is not necessarily a word about permanent exclusion. It does not erase Israel's place. It leaves open the possibility that the meal does not end with Israel. Matthew intensifies the barrier. Mark gives us the order behind it. Israel first does not automatically mean Israel only forever. The woman does not answer with a theological lecture. She does not begin arguing about Abraham, the prophets, or the future mission to the nations. She comes closer. Matthew says she kneels before Jesus and reduces everything to its simplest form. Lord, help me. Her first cry included a messianic title and an explanation of her daughter's condition. Now the prayer has been stripped down to need. No resume, no claim of entitlement, no demand that the history of Israel be ignored for her sake. Only 3 words. Lord, help me. Then comes the most difficult line in the entire encounter. Jesus says it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Readers have struggled with that sentence for centuries. They should. The word translated dogs is a diminutive form. It can mean little dogs, perhaps, suggesting domestic animals rather than the dangerous scavengers that roamed ancient streets. That distinction is real, but it cannot carry the entire explanation. A diminutive can soften a word. It can express familiarity. It can also belittle. The grammatical form by itself does not prove that Jesus is affectionately calling her a beloved puppy. And whether the word is translated dogs, little dogs, or house dogs, the basic structure remains. The children have priority. They receive the bread. The woman is placed below them. So the most important question is not whether Jesus meant a street dog or a household dog. The important question is what the image still contains. There is a house, there is a table, there are children eating, there is bread, and there are dogs beneath the table. The image creates a real hierarchy, but it also gives the woman a place from which to answer. She begins with words no one expects. Yes, Lord. She does not deny the order. She does not demand that the children be removed. She does not argue that the distinction between Israel and the nations never existed. She accepts the picture. Then she notices what the picture still allows. Even the dogs, she says, eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. That answer does not take bread from the children. It does not require Israel to become hungry so that her daughter can be healed. It does not ask Jesus to abandon his mission. It points to abundance. The dogs beneath the table receive what falls while the children continue eating. A crumb does not deprive a child. Mercy can reach the person underneath without emptying the table above. The woman does not deny Israel's priority. She denies that divine mercy must therefore be scarce. She does not ask Jesus to remove Israel from the table. She asks whether his table can overflow. That is the turning point. Until now, it might seem that the central virtue in this woman is persistence. She keeps speaking after the silence. She comes closer after the statement about Israel. She answers after the image of the dogs. Persistence matters. But her reply reveals something deeper. She trusts that even the smallest expression of Jesus' authority is enough. Distance cannot weaken his word, and mercy does not run out when it crosses a border. The person placed at the lowest point in the image understands the abundance of the table most clearly. That answer raises the question readers still debate. Was Jesus testing her? Some believe the exchange was a deliberate demonstration. Jesus allowed the barriers to become visible so that the woman's faith would also become visible, especially to the disciples who wanted the disruption removed. That reading fits the public reversal at the end. But the text never directly says, He was testing her. Others emphasize the historical order of the mission. Israel receives the message first. The promises to Israel are being fulfilled before the mission expands explicitly to every nation. Mark's word "first" strongly supports that interpretation. Yet the order of the mission does not completely explain the silence or the intensity of the exchange. Still others understand the conversation as a genuine challenge to the way the boundary is operating in that moment. The woman is not merely performing a role in a lesson with a predetermined script. Her answer matters as a real answer. That reading takes the dialogue seriously. But it should not be pushed into a claim the gospel never makes that she morally corrected Jesus or introduced him to a mission he had never understood. The text does not tell us which explanation occupied Jesus' private thoughts. It tells us what happened in public. The boundary was spoken. The woman answered, and Jesus honored her response. If you value biblical deep dives that separate the text itself from the assumptions built around it, subscribe to the channel. Then the debate ends. Jesus acts. He tells the woman that her faith is great and that her request will be granted. Matthew says her daughter was healed from that hour. Mark adds another detail. Jesus tells the woman that the unclean spirit has left her daughter. She goes home and finds the child lying on the bed, the torment gone. The woman leaves before she sees the result. She begins the journey home carrying only the word of Jesus. That detail connects her with another outsider in Matthew's gospel. The Roman officer also approached Jesus on behalf of someone else. The suffering person was somewhere else. The officer believed Jesus did not need to enter his house. A command would be enough. His authority could cross the distance. Jesus praised the officer's faith. The Canaanite woman shows the same kind of confidence. Both are outsiders. Both plead for another person. In both cases, the person needing help is not standing before Jesus. Both trust that his word has authority beyond his physical location, and both become some of Matthew's clearest examples of extraordinary faith. The reversal is difficult to ignore. Those with the expected religious credentials do not always see Jesus most clearly. Sometimes the outsider recognizes what proximity has allowed the insider to overlook. The woman's story also occupies a striking position in Matthew. Before the argument over purity and the journey to Tyre, Jesus feeds 5,000 people with a small supply of bread and fish. Then comes the dispute about clean and unclean. Then Jesus enters Gentile territory. Then the Canaanite woman speaks about children's bread and crumbs beneath a table. Afterward, Jesus heals great crowds. Then he feeds 4,000 people with 7 loaves and a few fish. Many interpreters understand this second crowd as largely Gentile, based on the surrounding geography and Matthew's statement that the people glorified the God of Israel. That interpretation has strong support. Matthew, however, does not stop to identify the ethnicity of every person in the crowd, so the conclusion should not be overstated. Even with that caution, the literary movement remains striking. Bread given to a multitude, a dispute over purity, a border crossed, a foreign woman asking for crumbs, then bread given to another multitude. The image of bread beneath the table does not appear once and disappear. It stands between 2 meals. The woman does not single-handedly open salvation to the nations. The movement toward every nation is larger than one person and one conversation. Matthew will state that mission explicitly at the end of the gospel. But her story can still function as a sign of what is coming. There is an order to the mission, yet the table is widening. Now the 3 apparent refusals can be seen together. The first is silence. It raises the question of whether she will be heard at all. The second identifies the mission with Israel. It raises the question of whether someone outside Israel can have any place in the Messiah's work. The third places her beneath the table. It raises the question of whether priority for the children means complete exclusion for everyone else. Her faith answers each question. She continues through the silence. She approaches Israel's Messiah without denying Israel's place. And from beneath the table, she recognizes that mercy does not have to be taken from the children in order to reach her daughter. The 3 apparent refusals reveal the boundary. Her faith reveals that the Messiah's mercy is greater than the boundary. Israel's place at the table was never the problem. The assumption that mercy could not overflow was, and that is why her great faith is more than emotional intensity. She understands who Jesus is. She trusts that his word can cross distance. She does not build her request on ancestry, status, or entitlement. And she believes that even the smallest expression of his authority is enough, because there is no scarcity in him. She asks for crumbs. she receives the complete healing of her daughter. The humility of the request does not make the miracle partial. The story begins with a woman crying out and receiving no answer. It ends with Jesus speaking directly to her, praising her openly, and granting the request that brought her to him. She enters the scene beneath the most outsider name Matthew can give her, Canaanite. She leaves as one of the rare people whose faith Jesus publicly calls great. She arrives with no visible evidence that her daughter can be helped. She returns home carrying only his word. And when she opens the door, the distance between Jesus and the child has made no difference at all. This story does not promise that every period of silence will end in the same kind of miracle. It does not teach that every apparent no is secretly a yes. It does not mean that enough persistence can force God to grant any request, and it should never be used to blame suffering people by suggesting that an unanswered prayer proves they lacked faith. What the story does show is that silence should not automatically be interpreted as contempt. It warns those who stand closest to religious privilege not to decide too quickly who belongs near mercy. And it shows a woman continuing to trust the authority and character of Jesus when nearly every visible part of the encounter seems to place her outside. She does not pretend the boundary is not there. She sees beyond it, not because the boundary has no meaning, but because the mercy of the Messiah has more. So how do you understand this encounter? Was Jesus deliberately testing her? Was he revealing the Israel first order of his mission? Or was this a genuine conversation in which a foreign woman challenged how that boundary appeared to operate? Share the reading you believe best fits the text. And subscribe for more biblical deep dives that distinguish what Scripture says from the traditions and assumptions that often grow around it.